friends, my name is Linda Dolke and I'm a demonstrator with Stampin' Up! In Australia, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make really cool backgrounds with your blends markers. So here is a couple of cards that I've created with this awesome new technique. I'm calling it blended alcohol because we're using blends markers which are alcohol based with rubbing alcohol. So there's a lot of alcohol in this, but actually it's a really easy technique and it will just use just a few things that you might already even have in your craft room and your kitchen possibly. So you're going to need some blends markers and you're going to need some rubbing alcohol and a piece of acetate to get started. And it's a very simple technique, so watch and I hope you enjoy it. So today we're doing a brand new technique and I'm calling this the blended alcohol technique. I don't know if that's a good name for it, but that's what I've decided to call it. I haven't seen this done anywhere else, but let's see how we go. So this is a cool background technique, and as you know, if you've been following me for a while, I love background techniques. Anything that creates a really interesting background is my jam. So this one does use some alcohol markers. I'm using Stampin' Up's blends because they're the ones that I prefer, but you can use any alcohol markers for this. And you're also going to need some rubbing alcohol. In Australia here I like to use this brand. It's called Isocol. You can get it at your local pharmacy, or even I think Coles have these as well, or Woolies. So it's just a rubbing alcohol antiseptic that you might find in the first aid section. So there you go. And we're going to be using that in conjunction with these. You're also going to need some white cardstock, or you could, I used Whisper white cardstock from Stampin' Up, but you could use any basic white cardstock or light coloured, light neutral coloured cardstock. Also shimmery white is another really great base for something like this. So that's my piece of white cardstock, and I'm also using a piece of acetate, or we call these with Stampin' Up, we call these window sheets. If you don't have any acetate, you could also, when I first did this one, I also used vellum. I just prefer the acetate because it's easier to see through it, so it's easier to see what I'm doing. But vellum will also work, or you could also use an acrylic block. That would work as well. But I like it to be, I like my piece to be a little bit the same size as the base cardstock or slightly larger. So this one's pretty much measured to be almost the same size as my piece underneath. So if you don't have any blocks big enough, you may find just a piece of acetate will be the way to go. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to bring in, actually I'm going to use my acetate first, and I'm going to start, I've picked out a couple of different coloured blends that I like the look of. Just deciding, will I stick with these colours? Or maybe I might just try something slightly different. I might try these three. They look nice together. Let's see how that goes. So on my original card I did use a little bit of bright yellow, but these ones, so the colours I'm using today are Night of Navy. I'm using the dark one, but you could use the light or the dark because these come in light and dark combinations. I'm using Rococo Rose, and I'm also using Mint Macaron. So, and that's, each one of those is the dark, but you could use either. And it doesn't really matter which colour we start with. All I'm going to do is on my piece of acetate, oh, sorry about the squeaky noises, I'm just going to start randomly colouring areas. Ooh, it makes a funny noise. And I'm just going to keep going. This one you can't see as much because it is quite a light colour. Definitely you want the darker of the mint macarons because the light one would be even lighter again than that. So you can see I'm just sort of randomly colouring bits. You don't need to butt them right up against each other. You can see I'm leaving a tiny bit in between, only because I don't want to get the other colours onto the tips of my markers. But I'm using the brush end of the marker, not the fine tip end. I'm using the brush end so that so the fine tip end would be too small for this because we're trying to colour a larger area. And I'm just going to leave it like that. And then I'm going to come in with my Isocol, or my rubbing alcohol. Now, If you have a dropper, you could use a dropper to put this on. I'm actually just going to use it straight from the bottle because it does have a little tiny tiny opening here, which will essentially allow it to drop out. And oops, it comes out quite quickly. I'm just going to put a little bit, just a drop here and there. Doesn't really matter. There's no right or wrong or correct amount. Just don't like have it everywhere on this. Okay, I'm just putting a few drops here. And I'm just going to come in with a an aqua painter. Let me grab one quickly. This one will do. A little bit of water in the nozzle. I'm just squeezing. So it doesn't really matter. You don't need to have water coming through it. You could just use a paintbrush if you want to. All I'm going to do is I'm going to spread that around a little bit. And this is the point that the colours are going to kind of get muddied up together anyway. So I'm kind of randomly going over it. And you might muddy them together a little bit. Doesn't really matter. But now the surface of this is wet and is actually moving around a little bit. Okay, then I'm going to get my piece of white paper and I'm going to lay that over the top. And this is why it's good to have the acetate slightly bigger, because you can kind of see. And I'm just going to kind of push that all over the base. And then now that it's still attached, I can switch it over and I can push the colour out a little bit if I think it needs to go in a particular direction. So it depends on how much alcohol you dropped on top as to how much it's going to move. And then I'm going to pull that up off the bottom. And as you can see, it's left kind of a really interesting background. Now, every time you do this, it's going to turn out differently. You'll never get them the same twice. You might think, well, you know, I don't like that much. You can go back on and you can add more colour. So I might go a little bit darker green. So this is actually a colour called Call Me Clover, which is going to be retiring soon. I'm going to bring up a bit more green because I think it needs it to be a bit darker. The mint macaron wasn't quite dark enough. And see, the navy's gone quite bright on here. Interesting how the colours change a little bit when you add the alcohol. So these are alcohol markers, and because you're adding alcohol to alcohol, essentially, that's what makes it run. So let's do it again. I might have decided I was happy with that. I could do a whole new one, or in this case, I'm actually thinking, whoops, a bit more over the top. So it's not an exact science at all. I'm kind of just, you could just have like circles, and as you can see, the circles kind of spread open, like that one there. That looks actually, that's really cool, that one. So you could get your pen again and move it around, or if you wanted to, you could just, I'm going to put it down the same way I was before. You can see the alcohol is coming through the paper, and that's perfectly normal. Okay, I wanted to get that, see that cool circle there from the dots? Okay, now that's starting to look really interesting. You can keep going backwards and forwards with this. You could try multiple, it's almost like a little like a printing system that you could actually use. But I'm actually really happy with that. I actually quite like it. You can see my original one, I used less colour and I had more white spots. You might prefer that. That looks really good, I think, as well. But it's actually a really fun technique. So I'm actually going to call that done. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, like I did on my first card, I'm using the Butterfly Beauty Thinlit dies. These are great. And as you can see, that's a lot of butterflies. And if I put them all on, they're pretty, but to me, that's almost butterfly overload. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to free a couple of the butterflies. On this one, I use the big butterfly, this one here, and this little guy here, which is the one down the bottom. So you could use those two. You could use 3 in between sizes, whatever you like. But let's see how we go here. So I'm going to cut this big one. I think I do want the big one because I like him. I think he's really fun. And I'm going to cut him along here as well. Okay. And I'm going to free him down the bottom here. And here. Okay, so he's now a complete butterfly. He doesn't even look like he was cut from somewhere else. I think he's fabulous. I'd really like to be able to see this circle because I think that's nice, and I love these pink dots, the way they've come out like that. Isn't it great? I just love it. So you could finish off this card however you like. I mean, you don't have to use the butterflies. You could just put a sentiment on it, or, you know, something else. I did use on this card, this sentiment is from the Timeless Tropical set, the one that says, may your birthday be memorable. And the colour ink that I've gone with is the Rococo Rose that I've used in here as well. So I've got a piece of Whisper White here, and I've got my Rococo Rose ink pad. So you can have a lot of fun with this technique. It's a technique that's not precise, so it's going to give you a different result every time. But I think that's kind of what makes it fun. And you don't need that many specialty items. Most people probably have rubbing alcohol in their cupboard, or if they don't, you really should, because you can use it for lots of things. Right, so there's my sentiment, which I've cut out with my 2-inch punch. You could go around that with a sponge and a colour, or if you wanted to, you could pick one of the colours we've just used. Which one will I go with? Maybe I might go with, because we did use the mint earlier, and so there is a bit of mint in it, I'm just going to zip around here with my mint macaron blend marker, just gently. And this is an alternative to using a sponge. Blend markers are fantastic because they give you a beautiful colouring result when you're colouring images, but it's also great for these kind of really cool techniques. Okay, do I want it to be that big? Maybe. And then maybe my little butterfly over here, maybe this little guy, something like that. So there you go. I'll finish this card off just by, this piece will fit straight onto, I've got a piece of Rococo Rose cardstock that I've cut to be slightly bigger on each side, and I'm just going to use some adhesive to pop that on. And here we go. Even while it's still damp, I could wait for it to dry. Normally I probably would, but I'm putting it straight on just because of time. And I'm deciding whether I actually want, maybe I just have one butterfly today. I don't know, maybe I do. That's a nice medium-sized butterfly, or we could have one that's landing, but I think I like this one. I'm just going to tidy up the edges from where I cut him off before. And I think I might just go with the one butterfly this time. So I'm going to use some dimensionals behind here. And I used gold foil paper for my for these little butterflies. They are from, like I said before, the Butterfly Beauty Thinlet dies, and they're fantastic. I'm going to use a glue dot to pop him on, and then I'm going to use my adhesive to pop that onto my card base, which of course I'll fold in half. So you can see it's actually a really quick and simple card, but it's such a cool technique, and I think you'll find it's a lot of fun. So I hope you have some fun with that. And I will be back with more cool things for you to see very, very soon. Have a go. Let me know what you think. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.